Hey there, everybody. Happy Friday to you. It is me, Nyjah Drakes, founder of Spark Her Blaze. And I am so excited that you are here joining us. I think we have a special treat in store for everybody, something a little bit different. And I have three absolutely amazing women with me this evening that I believe are going to truly bless your souls with their stories of pivoting and particularly giving ourselves as women permission to pivot. I think so often as women, we get so caught up and stuck into holding on so tightly to where we are that sometimes we miss out on what we could have. We miss out on the possibilities of what is really truly possible for us, and maybe even miss out on, a bigger and better plan that God has in store for us. But these ladies here, y'all, they ain't afraid. They ain't even scared. They have gone out there. They have pivoted. They have done the thing, and I am just so excited to have them with me this evening. So without further ado, I am going to introduce each one of them. Let me just tell you, they all have very long resumes, but in the interest of time, I am condensing so that we can just get on with the show. So just know that this is just a snapshot of all they've done. So I'm gonna start with Tanisha Nunn-Gary. She is an accomplished attorney who actually won the largest wrongful death verdict in the state of North Carolina, okay? Don't play. We're not playing, okay? She is now the president and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida. She is a philanthropist and a proud mama of 11-year-old Christian. Welcome to the show, Tanisha Nunn-Gary.
Thank you, Nyjah. Hello, ladies. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight.
We're happy to have you. So next, I'm going to introduce Miss Andrea Lewis. She is no stranger to the show. We've had her on before, and she is back by popular demand. She is here this evening as a mom of two absolutely amazing boys, a professor of my alma mater, Spelman College. And she has her upcoming ordination next month. She's the founder of Virtuous Pearl, an interdenominational women's ministry, and the author of 4 books? Three with another on the way.
Yes.
All right. So we are just excited to have you here, Andrea.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back.
Yes, I was about to say, thank you for agreeing to come back and have fun with us. And last but not least, we have, I'm trying to think of the right title, sister, pastor, also a very, very close friend, Vicky B. Turner. Thank you for joining the show. And Vicky Turner is a wife of 43 years. Y'all, she about to be entering the AARP, I think, in a couple days. But you wouldn't know by looking at her. Fly as ever. Pastor, mama of 3 adult children, a former entrepreneur, and a school board member in DeKalb County. And she won that thing. It wasn't even a close race. She won that thing outright just a couple of weeks ago. So we are excited to have Vicky B. Turner with us this evening.
Thank you. Well, you failed to mention my greatest accomplishment. My greatest is that I'm a nana of 5.
That's
5 grands, with the oldest one just graduating high school just a couple of days ago. So that's my claim to fame.
I forgot. Thank you for reminding me about that. That is a big accomplishment. We all hope to get there one day where we can say we got grands graduating from high school and moving on.
Yes.
So listen, y'all, tonight I wanted to talk to everybody about a topic that I think for women is really, really important. I've heard time and time again from women over the years who've told me, you know I need to make a change, and, I was thinking about it, and, but then when it gets to the point of actually making that shift, kind of they get stuck. They pause, they think again on it, and then a lot of times the shift never really happens. And so I really wanted to share stories of women this evening who were not afraid to make the shift. Well, maybe they were afraid, but they did it anyway. So nonetheless, they went ahead and they committed to the change, committing to making that shift. And so I think you're going to all be very inspired by these very different stories that these women are going to share this evening. And so I just want to start off by asking everybody. So I asked you to kind of think about this before the show. How many major pivots have you made in your life? And I'll start with you, Tanisha.
Oh, sure. Well, I look at them, my pivots, personally and professionally. And I would say professionally, I've had 4 major pivots. I went to law school after I graduated from undergrad, and I stayed at that one law firm for a long time, with a brief period where I went and worked for like a sister organization to the law firm. It was a nonprofit, but it was still a part of that group.
Okay.
And I think there I made the mistake that sometimes many of us make, is I stayed too long. There was no room for growth there. And I should have left before I did. But after that, I went to, interviewed for a lot of jobs, was trying to figure out what I should do next. Should I stay practicing law? Should I go into the nonprofit sector? Do I want to teach at a law school? And I interviewed with a lot of folks over several years and didn't get any offers when I thought I had gotten to the final round. So at some point, I just said, enough is enough. I left that law firm and hung my shingle and opened my own practice. And so,
yes.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to do it. But I want to say, just pause right there. I did have a plan. I don't encourage people to just pivot and just up and quit your job one day. You have to have a plan. So I had a plan with that when I opened my own practice. And after doing that for a few years, I landed the current role where I'm the president and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida. And only as God would have it, me owning my own practice really helped pivot me into this role. When I was interviewing, I was able to say, I've been a business owner. I know what it takes to run a business. If I had not had that stop, I may not be in this current position. So
wow,
pivot kind of built upon the next and helped me where I am today.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, this probably won't be my last stop, but I'm happy here. And then on the personal side, I think I've had like maybe 6 major ones.
Okay.
And I'm looking at them from just growing up. So I grew up in a small town in South Georgia, lived there my whole life. So that may be one. Then the next step after leaving that small town with all the support, I went to college in Atlanta at Spelman with Naja and Andrea, my classmates from the Olympian class of 19.
Olympian class.
That's right.
And from there, I went to law school. And in law school, I met my, who would be my future husband. And I had planned to move to New York and practice law, but he convinced me to move to Florida, which is how I ended up in Florida. I moved here in 1999. Left in 2010 with a baby, left a marriage with a baby, had to pivot and go to where I could have a good support system, went to family in Atlanta. And then after about almost 2 years, came back to Florida, came to Orlando. So my son and I have been here, I think it'll be 11 years in the fall.
Wow.
Those have been my personal pivots to get me to where I am.
Awesome sauce. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because I think sometimes women think that a pivot looks like this. You just like, oh, it's more incremental. Like you incrementally move from here. But like you just described, it really is up, down, around, but ultimately up, right? Ultimately, the trajectory is up, but it doesn't necessarily look like a straight line. That's probably a good lead in for you. Why don't you, how many pivots have you done professionally and personally?
Well, for professionally, I think I've had 2 major pivots, but then 3 pivots in each. And then I
Okay.
had a little pre-pivot. So let me tell you about my pre-pivot. When I went to Spelman, I wanted to be a high school teacher, a high school history teacher. And my first year walking into, there used to be an education building on campus. I was walking into the education building and there were these bulletin boards that lined the side of both hallways. And those were the bulletin boards that the students were learning how to make bulletin boards. And they were so cute. And I was thinking to myself, if I become a high school history teacher, I can't make these cute bulletin boards. And I changed my major on my walk down the bulletin board hallway.
Wow.
By the time I got to the advisor's office, I had changed my major to child development so I could be an elementary school teacher. And I think that little small pivot has really, it taught me a lot because I lead my life through discernment. And my favorite Bible scripture is Isaiah 30:21. That says, whether you turn to the right or to the left, you will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And that has happened for me like all throughout my life where I hear God's voice and he tells me which way to go. And so that short little walk and passing by the bulletin boards, that was God's voice telling me, that's not the way to walk. Let me show you how to walk. And I changed my major. So after I finished Spelman, I became an elementary school teacher. And I say I have 2 major pivots, but 3 in each. So I've worked for only 2 organizations in my professional career. But in each of the organizations, I've had 3 jobs. So I've had 3 jobs, in each organization. That's why I say 6 in all.
Gotcha.
And then personally, I've counted 7, I believe. And I think my pivots do kind of circle around seasons.
Okay.
But they're still pivots because I had to pivot in each. So one was my childhood in Southern New Jersey. I grew up in a very predominantly white community, and I knew that I did not want to go to a predominantly white institution for college. And so I pivoted from childhood to college, going to a HBCU, the number one HBCU. And then after that, I think the next big pivot was marriage and just getting used to being a married woman. And then after that was motherhood and all the complexities that come along with motherhood. And I also lost a baby. So that was definitely another pivot. And then divorce, huge pivot. After divorce, the death of my father, I would say, and then my call to ministry. So those have all been kind of my major personal life pivots.
Wow, those are amazing. And I look forward to really kind of diving deeper into some of those so that women can really glean sort of how you did it and what was involved, and take some notes on how do we go about doing that. All right, Miss Vicky Turner, tell me about how many pivots have you made?
That's real hard, and I'm going to try to be a good participant. I've had probably professionally, which is what I was focusing on, I think I've had 3 major. In 2000, I had built my career in the medical environment. I went to college to be a nurse, and I got all the way to my junior year, and my advisor, which I went to a predominantly white school, and my advisor discouraged me and said, you'll have to be here another year because you missed some courses that you need. And I became discouraged and said I didn't want to stay in school an extra year. And so I changed my major, Andrea, to child and family counseling with a minor in early childhood development. And so I guess that was a pivot for me, but it probably set me on a path for life. But I never got over that desire to be a nurse. And, part of nursing is you take care of people. And so, Drakes, you can probably identify with that in me. I like taking care of people. And so my first job, I'm going to back up. My first job was at 14 years old, and I was in a nursing home. And I was a nurse. You couldn't tell me I wasn't a nurse. I wore a white uniform, white shoes, white stocking, and a white sweater button with one button.
The prodigy nurse at 14.
I was at 14. So I've never gotten over that first nursing experience. And so I changed my major, went on and met my husband. That's a pivot, a wonderful pivot. And my husband is from Florida. And I did not like Florida, and I did not want to move there, but he loved Ohio, which is where I'm from, and he decided that that's where we would build our home. And so that's where we had our 3 children. And then in 1985, major pivot, we relocate to Atlanta. And my daughter, who was the baby, she was 9 months old. And so we came to Atlanta knowing very, very few people because it was the point between both families. My husband being from Florida, he was the only child and his mother was alone in Florida and she would not move, so we had to get closer. And so we came here and I continued my career in healthcare. I worked for medical companies, HMOs, the very first Black HMO that was ever established. I worked for that here in Georgia until it was bought out by United Healthcare. And then I went from there to Emory. And so the next major pivot was my son came home in the 7th grade from school one day, and he began to talk about a science teacher who had really touched his life. And he said, my science teacher, he said, if he couldn't teach, he wouldn't want to live. He loves teaching.
Oh, wow.
And so at that time, I was dealing with some discontent in my career. I felt like I was pushing a lot of paper. And so I looked at my husband and I said, is it possible that a child is leading the way? Because my son looked at me and he said, when his teacher told him all these things, he said, I'm going to tell my mom that. So I looked at Rob and I said, what do you think? He said, I want you to go and resign tomorrow. That
wow. And is that when you, at that point, like you knew you were moving to education?
That's when I moved to education.
So there was no plan. It was just.
There was no plan. Unlike Tanisha, I'm sorry.
Okay,
We've got a spectrum here, right?
I see.
It worked out for you.
Yeah.
And it's been my life. And so I went, I quit the job and I went to my church. I put a proposal before them. I asked them to sell me or to allow me to use a building on their property to open a school, a preschool. And they said to me, we don't want to sell it. We don't want it to be private, but if you'll come and work for us, then we'll do it. And so we felt it was the right thing to do. I joined the vision and opened up their preschool. And in the process of opening their preschool, they ran out of funds and said, would you start teaching? Would you teach? Pivot number something. So I went in the classroom. Oh my God, that's unbelievable how I was baptized in fire in the classroom. And I did it for a few years, and then they came back and said, we're ready, we got the money, when we want to move forward, would you open the preschool for us? And so I opened the preschool, got it licensed, got it accredited, and I oversaw it in administration for many years. Then when my daughter graduated college, she graduated high school in 2003. We were in New York City getting her moved into her dorm. And I've told my husband, I said, I think when I go back home, I don't think I'm going to go back to my life as I know it. Well, I thought that meant I was going to be an empty nester because she's the baby and the last one to leave. And so we're walking down the streets of New York City and my phone rings and it's our chancellor at our church. And he says, come back. We want you to be the headmaster of the entire school, K through 12. Pivot. And so I was like, wow. So we go back to Atlanta. I oversee the school. Eventually, the church ran out of funds and decided they no longer had a mission for education and they were going to close the school. Now, mind you, you go back, I had a vision for my own school, but I submitted that to theirs. So when my chancellor came to meet me And he said, we're going to close the school. We're going to have to lay everyone off, but we will keep you. You have a job. And I looked at him and I knew that the Lord had spoken to my spirit that I needed to seize that moment. And so I said to him, sell it to me. You don't want it. I do. You don't know how to do it. I do. Sell it to me. I've been faithful over your vision. And I desire to leave something for my own children.
So that gets you basically propelled into the entrepreneur world. So you start off first aspirations, medical profession, then you become an elementary teacher, then you're over administration, and now you're thwarted into entrepreneurship. So, I mean, you hear, y'all, if you're listening, that these stories are layered. They're layered, each of them, in terms of their pivots, as Andrea talked about, major pivots, and then even pivots within the pivots that often we are taking. Now, I need to ask you, as you're thinking about what the most challenging pivot was for you, how did you know? Like, how did you know, I got to do this? This is what I got to do. And Tanisha, I want to start with you because you shared a story about how you were at a big law firm, you had won this big case, and then you decided you were going to jump out on your own and start your own practice. Like, did you have clients? Like, what, like, how did you get to that point?
Right. And you know, when you talk about wanting growth, I knew at that law firm I would never make partner. And, you know, when you know your value and you know your worth, and as women, sometimes we can't wait for people to kind of tap you on the shoulder and say, you're next, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. When sometimes you can stay too long. And it was probably somewhere where I had stayed way too long my whole career because I was very comfortable. We get comfortable. We may be a little fearful of change. But one of my favorite quotes, which has stuck with me since I was in high school, is success depends upon the second letter. And of course, that second letter in success is you. So I was like, you know, I've got to take matters in my own hands. What am I going to do? And then that's when I decided I would go hang out my own shingle. And God is always so good. I mean, I didn't really take but one client with me. But when you have been in the profession for so long and you have family and friends, your phone will ring, people will support you. And I did have a little plan, Vicky. So I did have a plan, but that is when I just knew, you know, it was time to move on. When you know there's no room for growth, and even, you know, you've reached the max, maybe even financially, you know, there's no room, you're stuck, you've reached that ceiling, then it's time to go. And I will never forget a friend of mine, her mother had told me, and I wish I had listened, but you should always be interviewing. You should always be thinking about what's next for me, you know, and I didn't do that. I was just in this career. It was comfortable. It was a family business. So I had a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't thinking about where will I be in 5 years? Where will I be in 10 years? Where will I be in 15 years? I was just comfortable.
That's so good, Tanisha, because I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, like you made a voluntary decision to pivot based on you evaluated the situation. You were like, all right, I'm capped out. I'm not going any higher. My desire is to go higher. I'm capped out on money. I'm capped out on growth. It's time for me to pivot. I have a plan and I'm leaving. All right. So I want to talk to who had an involuntary pivot.
I had an involuntary pivot. I've had a few involuntary pivots.
Tell me how you managed that, right? Because the involuntary pivots, well, before you say that, before the involuntary pivot, did you have a feeling like
Absolutely.
you probably needed to pivot before the involuntary pivot happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. And so, like Tanisha said, that she felt like she had stayed too long and she wasn't going to make partner. Kind of similar circumstance where I knew that the next step wasn't going to come for me based upon personality. And I was, you know, staying just because that's what you do. You know, my parents taught me that you get a job, you keep a job. I think they're from that generation where they stayed on one job for 30 years. And, you know, I was, you know, going to be doing the same thing. And then one day somebody told me about a job at Spelman. And I said to the person, you know, I don't think I'll get that job. And they said, well, just go ahead and apply. And I remember I was unpacking some textbooks because this new school year was about to start, and I'm unpacking textbooks, and somebody is calling me about this other job. And I'm like, this is not the best time to be leaving the school system because the school year is just starting. So I go ahead and I apply for the job, and I made the 3 rounds of interviews. And I was like, okay, God, you know, okay. And then I found out what the salary was. And the salary was $30,000 less than what I was making. And I was like, well, hold up, God. Like, I don't think you really going to leave my job for $30,000 less. And they were, you know, like people were at Spelman where they were, you know, trying to get me to take this job. Well, you could teach an extra class. And so I worked it out where it was still $30,000 pay cut, but there was going to be less stress and something that I really, really wanted to do. So I ended up taking the job. And I could at that point because I was still married and I had the comfort and security of having another paycheck. 6 weeks into taking that job, 2 things happened at the 6-week mark. Number 1 was the president announced that she's closing down I was the director of the campus laboratory school. We're closing this down 6 weeks into the job. Then second, I find out that my marriage is falling, I don't say falling apart, fell apart. And so here I am. At the
same time?
At the same time, like within the same week. Yeah.
Wow.
And so personal life was difficult, professional life was difficult. And then in the midst, I was also in the process of getting my PhD. I was working on my PhD. My dad had cancer and we were taking care of him. So there was just a whole lot going on. But what I found is that it really was a saving grace, because if I had stayed in the job that I had, which was so hectic and toxic, I would not have been able to handle my dad's sickness and the professional turmoil that was going on with the closure of the center. But thankfully, I did not lose my job, and I went into the education department to start teaching full time. And I will say that in that role of teaching full time in the education department, that really wasn't my journey. My journey and my goal was to be an elementary school principal. However, what I have found over the years and my steady growth since I took this other job and just the opportunities, I never planned to write a book. I've written, I'm on book number 4. And just some of the opportunities that have been opened up to me, or opportunities that would not have presented if I stayed in my old job. So I think sometimes we just have to be open to following God, and back to that Bible scripture that I shared earlier about hearing God's voice and knowing which way to walk. So no, it wasn't comfortable taking a $30,000 pay cut and then going through a divorce with less, with missing this $30,000.
And small kids too.
And with 2 small kids, yes, and paying private school tuition at that time and having a very large mortgage. That God has been good. And in my household, the math has never been 2 + 2 = 4. So God has truly made a way out. When people say God has made a way out of no way, I am a straight living witness of that. And through that,
Andrea, when you're talking, it made me think about something that I learned in the process of an involuntary pivot. And that was, I remember We were at a point, we were in an entrepreneurial venture that had gone completely south. Like the numbers were just beautiful and it was going to be a beautiful thing, and then not. And so we were contemplating what are the options for us to get out of this. And I remember sitting down with my accountability partner and I'm just writing down, all right, option 1. All right, okay. Option 2, all right. Option 3, option 4. And so I was like, I think there are really just 4 options. And when I tell you clear as day, the Lord impressed upon me, I want you to write option 5. And I was like, I got no option 5. I got 4 options. And I just remember feeling in my spirit, option 5, you need to always have an option 5. And that's the space where you leave open for what God is going to do, that you can't plan, you can't envision, that you have no idea about. And so now when I plan, whatever that last option is, I add +1 and I'm like, and let's add the next option, because you gotta stay open. And I think that's a really important lesson for us as women to learn, is that we like it nice and neat, you know? Like you said, 2 + 2 = 4. But that God doesn't work in that kind of math. He doesn't add like that. He multiplies, honestly. And so for us, I think you just made such a valid point that we just really need to make sure that in all our planning, we leave some margin and some wiggle room for the opportunity that we can't even see. And it may not even look like an opportunity, because all that didn't sound like opportunity to me, Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't sound like opportunity, but in the end, that's what it turned out to be, right?
Yeah.
All right, Miss Vicky Turner, any involuntary pivots for you?
You know what, I am listening to you ladies, and not to deflect, but I see it's so clear how our lives are woven together as women, and each of you have said things that speaks to my life, my spirit of where I've been. It's so interesting to me, and which I believe the power of women is so great if we would just connect more with one another. I've always believed that, you know, how you nurse your babies, and how that the value of nursing your babies, and you try to give them the best when they're growing. That's what we need as women, to nurse off of each other's breast. I really believe that. But thinking about what you said, when you've been pressed, you're back up against the wall. My favorite scripture is Jeremiah 29:11. That's my scripture, Vicky Turner. So I read it as such: for I know the thoughts I have towards Vicky. They are plans to do Vicky good and not evil, to give Vicky hope and a future. I hold on to that. I've raised my children hearing that God has a plan. And my husband has shared with me over the years, God is the only one I know that doesn't have a plan B, because his plan always works. He doesn't have to come up with the plan B. And so I've had those moments in my life, and we all have had them, when you know that you know that you know. I remember at our church, I was at our church, and this is before I took the school. And one of the men of God was on the stage, and he said, how many of you need to hear a word from God? I jumped up like many people did. Stand up if you need to hear a word from God. I stood up. I was ready to receive, tears falling. He said, God said he's not going to give you another word until you go and do what he told you. Bam. Drop the mic, right? Go do what he told you. And that was my moment to have my own school, my own business. But fear kept me, the fear of the unknown, of coming out from under the covering of working for someone else who signed the checks, who I called and said, I'm a little short, can I get such and such? And now the buck stops with me. And so it's been critical, but it's been those moments when God has proved himself over. I got the same math going in my life, Andrea. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 in our household. He multiplies over and over. Now, has it been easy? I would be sitting here lying if I told you that I go skipping up and down the street licking ice cream. It is not. Life, it's tough. But I was telling Drake's earlier today, when I had my own business, I was in the grind of it. I was toiling all day, and I likened it to the fishermen when Jesus, they were skilled. I look at it like this: they had gotten their degrees, they had gotten their experience, right? And they knew what they knew their craft, and they were out there fishing, and they knew how to fish, but yet their efforts did not produce results at all. And so he shows up and he says, cast the net on the other side. Just that instant act of obedience rendered a net breaking catch.
So how do we know when we need to switch to the other side? I think that's a lot of times where the challenge comes in for us, right? Because we're on that, we're doing what we're gifted to do. We're doing what we were trained to do, and we're not yielding the results. How did you ladies know, like, I need to switch? Like, if something doesn't change, then like it's gonna be, and I could actually share a little personal experience. I spent a lot of time in corporate America doing the corporate thing, and it was really hard. I have 5 kids and married, and so like it just was really a difficult journey for me, and it taxed me emotionally, physically, mentally. And I think after years and years of just chipping away at my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health, it reached a point where I don't know if I would have necessarily voluntarily made that pivot, the pivot that I made. But my kid, I have a child who has some special needs challenges, and I knew that I needed to make some changes for him, right? So I couldn't make the pivot for myself, but some kind of way I could rationalize, but I could do it for him, right? I could make that pivot for him. So I made that pivot for him and started homeschooling. And at that same time, I realized I needed that pivot. I needed that pivot for me because I had lost track of my priorities, just to be quite frank with you. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think that things had gotten completely out of whack in terms of what I was prioritizing. How do you think that your prioritizing or lack thereof either caused you to stay in the job longer than you thought, or understanding your priorities caused you to make that pivot? What role did priorities play in that?
I think anytime when kids come into play, you look at things in a whole different light. Prior to motherhood, you can kind of be on one track, but once a child comes into your life and you have a baby, then it becomes about them oftentimes. And so I know for me, a lot of the changes that I have made have been because I know it's what's best for my child. And that is what has propelled me. It's time to move on from this. It's time to move on from that, because I want to make sure that I am healthy and strong. So, if you're in a job that you're not happy, if you're in a marriage where you're not happy and you're, feeling emotionally drained and beat down, you can't be the best parent and the best mother that you need to be. So I do think that although motherhood adds a whole nother dimension, as we all know, but at some point too, if you can't do things sometimes for yourself that you need to do, when you look at that child like you, Naja, you're like, my child has special needs, I need to be there. And I experienced something similar. My son was born at 25 weeks. So
Wow.
he was 1 pound, 8 ounces. They didn't think he was going to live. A lot of people didn't even know that I was pregnant. So he was in the hospital 112 days, big celebration when he was released. And then within a few months of that, my marriage fell apart.
Wow.
So not only did I leave a job, I left Florida with a baby, and God is good. He's doing very, very well. But there was the occupational therapy, the physical therapy, the eye surgeries, a lot that comes along with having a premature child. But I had to focus on him. And so I think all throughout for the last 10, 11 years, I've always said, what's best for Christian and what's best for me. And so that has helped me. You know, I get so much strength from just knowing that I want to be strong and healthy for him. And quickly, if I could just piggyback on what Vicky said, it is so true with women and the sisterhood. I could not have gotten through my ups and downs, of course, without God first and foremost, you know, and my family, but my friends. Andrea has been with me since over 25 years or so, but I'm telling our age, but specifically through all of that, through my child being born prematurely, she'd been through something similar, through the divorce, through the job changes, through financial challenges. Oh my gosh, financial challenges. And I think oftentimes we don't talk about those things, but just losing your home, having a short sale, considering filing for bankruptcy. How am I going to pay this? How am I going to pay that? So much goes, you know, into that. But I think you do need your circle of girlfriends that you can truly trust, shoulders to cry on, to laugh. We always cry, but we end up laughing about it at the end. And just people that you know have your best interests and that are praying for you.
Yeah.
With you. So I am very thankful for tonight's conversation. Just a circle of women in my life who have carried me when I didn't think I was going to make it. So everybody out there who's listening, you know, there's that old poem that's been going around for a long time, sitting on the front porch. Get yourself some girlfriends, because that will help you through life for sure. For sure.
It's so true. I mean, it's amazing what the sense of community can do. And I mean, you think about just like, you know, even just, you know, things like therapy where it's based on talking. Talking is so critical to our health, our mental health, our emotional health, getting it out there and not having it all stored up. And okay, so, I mean, then letting the facade down, right? Because other people on the outside are looking in. And to them, this pivot, whether voluntary or involuntary, it may not really look like a move up to them. How did you manage, you know, just the perceptions? And I think a lot of times we as women, we may not make a decision just because we don't want to confront those people on the outside and their perception of what's happening. And I know that has happened for me multiple times. You know, when I left my corporate job to homeschool, everybody thought I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Nobody was, for the most part, saying, girl, thumbs up, yes, yes, homeschool. Nobody said that. Most people were like, have you lost your mind? Like, how are you gonna do this? And then the classic phrase, I could never do that, God bless you. Okay, what kind of backhanded compliment is that? So, you know, how did you deal with the people on the outside who were in your face, or, you know, just like, oh, you know, I thought you were doing something different, or, you know, how did you manage that?
I can answer that, but before I answer that, I also want to just ditto what Tanisha said about having a sister girl. And I definitely couldn't have gotten through all of my tribulations, past and current, without having Tanisha in my life. You know, it was one of those things where you call crying, like, I'm losing my house. You too? You know, we've had all of these YouTube moments where we can just sit and cry and laugh together. But to answer your question, Nasha, I think I just had to be authentic. You know, I had to be authentic with my experiences. So I'm thinking about, particularly when I lost my house. I actually lost two houses, one through short sale, one through foreclosure, at the same time, and both in my name. So I think that I had to be authentic, because at first I was embarrassed, especially because I was in this organization and a lot of the people who were in my chapter lived in my neighborhood. And I was so embarrassed about losing my home and about my marriage falling apart, and most of them were married. And I just really had to be authentically me. And when things would come up and money was needed for certain things, I don't have it, I don't have it. And so to me, I just think that at a point of feeling embarrassed and having to move back in with my parents, and I lost my car and having to drive my parents' car for a while, you know what? It is what it is.
And thank God you have that option to fall back on, that you had.
Right.
You weren't homeless, you had a place to go. You weren't carless, you had a car to drive. And sometimes I think that we have to just really, like you said, stand in the truth of what it is. It's not an embarrassment. Look, I'm in a season like I'm sure you have too. If we all, like, Jesus at the well, start writing in the sand, who has not sinned, cast the first stone. Come on now, we all have been in the place. Now, how honest are you going to be about it? Now, that's a totally another thing, but I have just found, honestly, just being honest about it is so liberating to me, because then ain't nobody got no power over what I'm about to tell you, because I already made peace with it. So you can have whatever opinions you want to have about it, because for me, I've already made peace. So I think that that's a really good point about not letting shame, stand in the way of you doing what you need to do. And I told you, I watched your story from afar. I had no idea all these details of what happened. I knew that the marriage had fallen apart, and I knew that that things weren't that great with respect to the school and that sort of thing, but I had no idea the depths of the challenges, right? But nonetheless, I watched you persist, Andrea. It was amazing. I was like, how is this girl getting her PhD? Wait, didn't she just, hold on now, I thought, okay, now it's a book? Okay, wait, hold on now. And I'm looking at myself like, okay, no excuses. No excuses, Naj, because, and I think we have to understand it starts with a decision. Yes. You made a decision. You were pressing forward like ain't no time. I'm sure you had your moments where you cried. You had your moments.
Absolutely.
At a certain point, do you remember when you made like a decision to just be like, I'm about to press, y'all. It's just I'm just about to press all the way through.
I do. I'll tell you really quickly. I was sitting at my desk in that the campus laboratory school, sitting at my desk crying, and just stop crying for a moment and like realize, so are you just going to keep coming to work and shut your door and cry every day? Or are you going to actually pick yourself up and do something? Because at that moment, my two little boys, all they saw was a crying mother. And I couldn't have my two little boys having a broke down mom. And it was at that moment of sitting at my desk, dried my eyes, and boom, kept it moving from that moment on.
You know what, ladies, I heard this when as a young woman. I used to be the youngest person in the room, and now I'm the oldest. So I'm trying to deal with that. I'm trying to deal with it.
And fabulous. And
let me just tell you, sweetie, AARP starts courting you right at about 55.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
They don't wait, they
decade late.
I threw all the advertisements in the trash because I wanted to say, I'm not old. Leave me alone. But my husband convinced me about the discounts at the grocery store. So I have owned my age. But I remember hearing, as I was a young woman, probably in your age group, they said, when you get to 60, it's a wonderful place to be. They said, that's when you don't give a damn. Okay? I heard this from many people. You just don't give a damn. So I'm waiting on the big 60 because I've always gave a damn a little bit too much. And so I'm not one of those people, that's let it roll off your back. And so when I turned 60, I was waiting on this light bulb moment or a lightning to strike. And I'm going to walk into the environment and says, I don't care what you think. But it did not happen for me. And I still cared. And what I have had to do is, for me, I had to give myself permission to be who I am. And who I am, and because I've been driven most of my life, having worked from 14 I've always been driven to achieve. And so to work hard, always in the press. And so my life has thrived on a lot of noise. The phone is the noise, and the computer is noise, and it's noise. It's people need me. I got to go, I got to be. And so when I turned 60, the noise went away. And I got sick, pivot. And the noise, the silence invaded my life like nothing I had ever known. Because I'm used to noise, and I thrived on it. I didn't realize how much. But when the phone wasn't ringing and nobody needed me anymore, I went through a stage. I went through that. And I worked through it, and God met me in my sick. When I went to the doctor, and they had told me that they found a brain tumor, and they told me that, and this is what really got me and broke me. The doctor said, you've probably had it about 17 or 18 years. It's one of the slowest growing tumors you can have. He said, I feel absolutely confident, though, that it is benign. And so I believe the Lord. When my husband rode me in the wheelchair up to the surgery, the nurse comes out to greet me, and she has on her scrubs, it's embroidered, by his stripes, you are healed. And I look at my husband, I said, now look at God, he sent me a word on the way. Sometimes you don't want to go, but you got to go, and on the way you receive. And so I went through that, and I was healed, and it was benign, like he said. And I'm getting to my point. I'm 65 in just a few days. And right here at about 64, I had my light bulb moment where I just don't give a damn. And I mean it.
I know, right? Celebrate.
It's like, I don't live to offend anyone. I don't live to hurt people, but I am authentically who I am, who he made me to be. I've arrived here. And I tell people I got t-shirts in the closet. I got stripes on my back, been there, done that. I don't care, because now my life is about what is my legacy? What kind of world am I leaving for my children? Now that's a different kind of life when you're in politics, because politics is all driven by approval ratings. That's why you hear it all the time. The president is really being approved right now. Oh, he's in the dumps. So this is up and down. I just don't give a damn, because I'm fully giving myself, and I want you to receive it. But if you don't, see you later. As the kids say, alligator.
Yes. And I think that's so powerful, because, I would imagine that 64 and 3/4-year-old Vicky would have wanted 25, 35, 45. We're all of us in our mid 40s, to have told 45-and-a-half-year-old Vicky,
yes,
you need to get to the point where you got to do what you're being called to do, and keep your eyes focused on that.
Yes.
And then you won't even see what's happened. You won't even see the folks around you, because you're so focused on where you are trying to go. And I think that's so powerful. And something else that you said, Vicky, which was, it was as you were on your way that you got the clarity about, and the confirmation that you were on the right path. I want to ask you ladies, because believe it or not, we've been chatting for an hour already, and I know that went by fast, but I want y'all to think about, what would you tell a woman who is considering a pivot? Maybe it's voluntary, maybe it's involuntary, but she's at a point where she's either being forced into change or seriously considering a change. What would you tell her is the most important thing she needs to consider as she is considering that change, that pivot?
I think first of all, just before you even get to that point, just know it's going to be okay.
Amen.
I think whatever happens, it's gonna be okay. As women, we put so much time and energy into stressing out about things.
Yes.
it is going to be okay. Whether it's a voluntary pivot or an involuntary pivot, you're going to land on your feet. It's going to be okay. And then,
and even if you don't, you get back up when you fall, and hold your sister, girlfriend right down the street gonna help you up. Like, girl, get up off your butt, let's go.
absolutely, if you fall down, you're gonna get up, and it's gonna be okay regardless. And so first, just know that it's gonna be okay, because sometimes I'm a planner, as you all have heard. We have our lives planned to a T, and when it doesn't go as we thought, it's like, oh my gosh, have a little mini nervous breakdown. No, everything's gonna be okay. Everything works out for the good, so it's gonna be okay. And then I think just really take a step back and think about what is going to make you happy. Andrea gave that perfect example when she was gonna receive a $30,000 pay cut. For a lot of folks, they would have just said, forget it. I'm not gonna pursue that. But she went ahead and pursued it, and that propelled her to her next step. The timing was good because, she was going through so much. Her marriage fell apart. Her father was sick. So she had some flexibility. She wasn't in that toxic environment. So she gave up something, but she gained so much during that time. So I think sometimes just know that the package may not look like what you think it should, but you kind of have to trust yourself. And if that doesn't work out, it's going to be okay. You'll pick yourself up and you'll move on to the next thing. So I think being flexible is important, but most of all, thinking about what's going to truly make you happy. Don't stay somewhere where you're feeling stuck and there's no room for growth. Think about where you're going to pivot and pivot on up.
Amen. That's good, Tanisha.
I would ditto everything that Tanisha said. So all of that, and on top of it, I would say, of course, have a sister girl network. I think you have to have someone to talk to. A sister girl network, but not too many people. Like, everybody doesn't need to know your business. You need to keep it a small group. And then also I would say have a mentor. Have somebody who's been there and kind of can help guide you. And if things are going awry in your point of pivot, and for me and others, it was financial piece, because then what I didn't say was in the process of losing the house and all that, and there was a major child support issue going on of not receiving. And so then it's just my salary that was minus the $30,000 carrying everything. And you have to be willing and open to accepting help. And I am not someone who likes to ask for help. And so when you're at that point, and when you're at rock bottom and you don't even have money to buy a carton of milk in your bank account, which is where I was several times, you have to be willing to accept help. And so whether it's from your family, your friends, for me, it was also church members who helped me in getting clothes for my children. So I think you just have to really have a support network to be able to help you, and don't be afraid to accept help. And I didn't ask them for help. They saw a need and they extended something to me, and I said yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
You know what, I would say what each of you have said, and the scripture that comes to my mind that I love is, a righteous man, he falls 7 times. And I've pondered that scripture, talked to the children about it. My husband and I have talked about it. What righteous means to me, they were in right standing with God. That means he went to the right college, lived on the right street, married the right woman, had the right children, a picket fence, and had all the things were right, was a tither and a giver. But he fell 7 times. And as my husband said to our boys, just get up. Just get up. It's that 8th time, that new beginning. So I would say to that younger woman, even to my younger self, stop laboring over perfection. Stop laboring over perfection. It's going to happen. If it happened to the righteous man, okay? And I don't call myself righteous that much. But if it happened, it could happen to us. And so don't labor over it. Just get up. As Tanisha said, it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Going to be all right.
That is so good. Oh my goodness, ladies, y'all have blessed me so. I mean, all of your advice and recommendations and just your stories in and of themselves, I mean, have just encouraged me even, because when I was looking at my stuff and I was just like, ooh, I've been pivoting a lot. But then to hear you ladies pivots and how you managed and just the resources that you pulled on, and then just deciding it's going to be all right, right? It's going to be all right. You gather your sister network. You trust that there is going to be that ram in the bush, that thing is going to come through for you. And knowing that if you take that pivot, and now, would any of you regret the pivots that you've taken? No. See, and that's the thing. I think so often we, as women, struggle whether we should take the pivot or not. And even when the pivot doesn't go the way we planned, it still works out. And if you take that leap and you trust that, you know, this is going to bring you growth or whatever it is that's important to you in that particular season, maybe it's going to bring you more time with your family, less stress. You know what those variables are for you that are valuable and that are important that you're considering. If those things are important to you, that a pivot really may be worth considering. Don't let fear stop you from grabbing hold of all that's on the other side of fear. So I thank you ladies so much for your time on a Friday night when y'all could be out and just having a good time. Y'all decided to spend it with me and I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I so appreciate it. So ladies, I hope that you've gleaned something from these conversations, these inspiring testimonies, and just experiences where women have moved forward and pressed forward and achieved so much as a result of simply making a pivot. So y'all have a great night. Thank you so much again. And until we meet again, wait a minute, somebody has something coming out I'm supposed to talk about. A book? Wait, hold on. What am I supposed to talk about? Is it Andrea? Give a plug for your book, girl.
Well, I am currently in the process of writing a book. It's called She Who Believed, Redefining Life with God's Grace.
Ooh, that's a wonderful way to end. So we'll have to have you back on the show once that gets released so you can show us how we can believe and get all that with God's grace. I'm looking forward to that. So y'all all have a great evening. Thanks so much for joining.
Hold on for 1 second.
What happened?
Birthday. Happy birthday to Vicky.
Thank you. 7-11. It's 7-11. So that's a major holiday. Don't forget, celebrate. But Drakes, I want to share one thing.
Okay.
And then you can close it or whatever, but I didn't know how to tell you how to do it. I want to share this scripture with you all. In particular, Tanisha and Andrea. And I can't tell you where it is. It's just one of my favorites. It's the sufferings of today are not worthy to be compared to the glory that shall be revealed.
Amen.
Man.
Amen to that. So all that suffering, now we're looking at glory, y'all. We got PhDs, we got heads, executive directors of nonprofits, we got politicians, all of that. And you would never have known the journey, the pivots, the challenges that they pressed through to get there. So yay, thank you. And I look forward to hearing about as the glory, what is it? Glory to glory, right? Even more coming in the future. So I'm excited about that. Thank you so much, Vicky, for sharing that.
Ladies.
I will see you guys again next week on Spark Her Blaze.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, ladies. Thank you. Wait, what happened?